Hey y'all, this is Sean and welcome to your fifth Autodesk Eagle tutorial. Today we'll be talking about how to make custom libraries. These custom libraries are going to help us to be able to move from having a breadboard to having something like this. In a breadboard we may have these little sensor boards like this pressure and temperature sensor board here that we would normally plug into the breadboard, and then we'd have jumper wires hooked up to something like this, which is our microcontroller. And like I was telling you in that first tutorial, that when you have a bunch of jumper cables, there's a lot of room for things to get disconnected, and it's kind of hard to test your platform pretty ruggedly if you just have something like a breadboard. But if you move over to a PCB like this, where you can just directly plug in these components like a microcontroller here, or plug in these sensors, it makes for a much better means of connecting everything. And you know for sure that there is copper that's going to connect one trace to another that you cannot tamper with. Um, so to be able to do this, we are going to need to figure out how to bring this component into Autodesk Eagle. Now natively, Eagle is very good at bringing in like this specific little chip right here, or this specific component. It's not so much as great about having repositories for this whole board itself. Like the Arduino, for example, is the layout for the whole Arduino, like the board itself. For these sensors, they're not so readily available compared to like microcontroller boards. So we're going to actually have to create our own version. So to do that, the first thing I'm going to have y'all do is go over to adafruit.com. Okay, and I would like, if y'all could go ahead and try sourcing. I would recommend just sourcing your parts from Adafruit. And the reason I say you should source all your parts from Adafruit is because Adafruit actually provides all of its documentation open source. So when we go and let's say I want to use this little circuit right here. And normally, if you were to buy this from some manufacturer, they won't tell you how this board is laid out or how this chip interfaces with, like, oh, this resistor here. You wouldn't know that. But Adafruit actually provides a significant amount of documentation. So if I scroll down, there's always going to be these technical detail sections right here that if I click on them, I can actually download this little schematic here, and I can copy and paste these schematics into my design. Now for the purposes of creating the board, I'm going to need this board layout that they provide. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is just test with this component and show you how you can do it, but the process is the exact same thing for any device. So I'm first going to go ahead and download these PCB files just on their GitHub. And you can see inside of the contents of the GitHub, you'll see that there's a board file and there's a schematic file. Okay, so these are what's going to be really useful for me creating the library that I want. Okay, so I'm just going to click on this link and hit download zip. And so I've gone ahead and downloaded it. And now I've got this folder right here. Now open it up. And I'm first going to start out just by opening up the board file. Okay, it'll take a little bit of time, but it's going to open up a separate window. Okay, now I recommend you work in two different windows. Alright, so one window will have, this layout here, and in another Eagle window. So you notice if I hover over this, I only have, so in my case it actually opened up two separate versions of Eagle. So this is 9.1 and then this is 8.7.1, but it really doesn't matter. I should still be able to copy over from one to the other. But in your case, you probably won't have that issue. You'll just have just two control panels open, one for this board layout and one that we can actually start tampering with. Now, while this is open, in the other control panel, we're going to go ahead and hit libraries. And you can see under libraries is in the LBR folder is all of the libraries that we have added into our repository. Now, what we're going to do in this tutorial is to create a new library that will exist inside of our own repository. And this library we create is going to be custom, and it's going to contain the exact layout of this. Alright, so to do that, I'm first going to hit File at the top, and then I'm going to hit New, and then I'm going to hit Library. Okay, so when I hit that, it's going to open up this window here. Okay, so this is kind of what I was showing you at the beginning in telling you about, Eagle. It has all these repositories of packages. And inside of a package, you can have multiple devices. Okay, so you can have, all sorts of whatever component you want. But a single device has subsections, right? So in a device, I will have a package, a 3D package, and a symbol. And when I combine three of these together, the package, the 3D package, and the symbol, I can create a single device from that. All right, so I'm going to first go ahead and lay out what the package looks like. So I'm going to hit Add Package down here. It's going to ask me, okay, what do you want to name the package? And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check what the name of the component that I was looking at in this other panel here. And in this case, it's called the Adafruit Power Boost 1000C. Okay, so I'll call it that and I'll hit OK. And it's asking me, okay, do you want to create a new package? And I'm going to say yes. And it's going to bring me into this interface here. This interface is actually very different from, it's not too different, but it is you need to understand that this is a bit different than just a normal schematic. Okay, notice that the options are more limited in this, right? I can only actually create these pads. So the pads indicate where, through-hole component would go through. And I just need to, in here, I need to actually lay out what the component that I'm plugging in looks like. So the component I'm plugging in looks like this. So I need to map onto this window the locations of these holes right here. Okay? And in order to do that, I need to figure out what the distance, the center point of this circle is from the origin location here. Okay? Now, before I go ahead and do anything else, the first thing I'm going to do is I just want to first get the outline of this device. So to do that, I'm just going to hover over to the layers settings here. And this may look different on yours because you can see in my version of Eagle, it looks like this. And then this is a newer version. So you'll see the layer settings is kind of different. So if I click on layer settings in this case and I hide all of my layers, I kind of can't see anything now. But the one that I'm actually interested for the outline will be the dimension layer or layer 20. Okay, I'm going to hit OK for that. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to use the group select tool and copy this by hitting Control C. And then I'm going to come over to this tab over here and I'm just going to paste this in. Okay, don't worry about this. And you'll see that it brings it in. But what I need to make sure that I do in order for this outline to actually be positioned properly, I need to make sure that this is 90 degrees with this crosshair here. So to do that, I'm just going to bring down my increment value, and I'm just going to first select everything, zoom in a little bit more, and then start to dial in. And you can see I'm slightly off. And now you can see, so if I follow this line all the way down, I get to the crosshair. Follow this line, I get to this line right here. So now I am flush 90 degrees with the crosshair. Okay, so I know my outline is good now. The problem with this in its current state is that right now the layer that this outline exists on is the dimension layer. So if I were to take this and bring it into one of my other designs, what would happen is, like I said in the previous tutorial, the layer 20 or the dimension layer corresponds to the cutout of the board. So if I were to add this to a board file that I was working on, it would actually cut this section out when I added this component in. So what I need to do is change the layer that this exists on. One really useful tool for doing that is the change tool. If I click on this change tool, it just looks like a crescent wrench. If I click on this, you can see that there is an option for layer. Okay, if I click on that, I can then select which layer I want to move it to. In my case, I'm going to move it to the T-place layer. Okay, this is a pretty good layer that acts as the silk screen. Okay, so the silk screen is simply a layer on top of the board that is just dedicated for, writing stuff. You can see on this board the silk screen is this little white layer that, they can put text on it, power boost, Adafruit. That is the layer that it will exist on. So having a nice little outline on our board will be really helpful for being able to know where the device goes. So I'm just going to go and select T-place and hit OK. And I need to start actually clicking on each of these segments to actually change them over to the dimension layer. Okay, eventually I'll get that. And now if I go around this whole outline here, you'll see that there is no more orange. Alright, so the outline is completely done. The next step is to figure out what our distance of that center point is from the rest of our design. So to do that, I'm just going to go back to our layer settings in the previous board, and I'm just going to show all of the layers again. Okay, and actually it's still pretty, it's kind of difficult to see things when I'm in this view, so I'm just going to start to get rid of some of these. I kind of want to keep the pad because that is the actual circle, and then I'm just going to try to get rid of the other stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and hide all the layers and just only show the pads. Okay, so now that I have that, I think I'm kind of happy with that, and then I'm going to hit OK. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the tool called the dimension tool. Okay, the dimension tool is really nice for, so you'll see if I hit the dimension tool, it'll automatically bring back the trace layers. Okay, this is fine. That's not going to make too big of a difference. In fact, it's going to help us a bit in order to figure out where the crosshair of this is. So while I'm in the dimension tool, I can specify what units that I want. So in my case, I'm just going to be working in millimeters, and you'll see that there's a couple of options here that I can use. By default, the dimension tool can be used to just find point-to-point distances. So if I click on one point, I can click on another point, and I can figure out what the distance is in millimeters. Now, for the purposes of knowing the distance from this center point here to the actual origin point, I'm only actually interested in either the X component or the Y component. So I'm either going to use the horizontal tool or the vertical. So I'm first going to start by learning what my X value is. So I'm going to click right here, and then the next place I'm going to click is right here. Okay, so you'll see when I did that, I'm getting a value of about 12.83. So I'm just going to take note of that. I'm going to say X 12.83. I just have a piece of paper off on the side here. Okay, and now I need to find what my Y distance is. So I'm just going to do the exact same thing. And I'm going to hover over back to crosshair here. Hit there. And you can see that I have 1.4 millimeters. Okay, so now that I have that, I can move over to this side. And I'm going to go ahead and add a pad. Okay, I'm going to add a pad that's actually very large compared to what it actually needs to be. So I'm going to max out at about 39. Okay, you'll see why that's going to be helpful for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and place one down randomly. And then I'm going to use this properties tab or the info button here. And then I'm just going to click on the crosshair of this pad right here. And you'll see that currently the units of this are in mil and not millimeter. So what I need to do is go to grid, change this from mil to millimeter. Okay, then hit OK. And now if I hit the info button, everything will be in terms of millimeters. So now I'm just going to input my x first, so 12.83, and then the other value is 1.4, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK. So it's gone ahead and it's placed it very similar in location to where this first item is here. Okay, so we've done our first line. Now what's nice about this is we don't actually have to go through the trouble of finding each one of these distances and adding them independently. Well, we can do ourselves a favor, and I'm going to go ahead and go back to layer tab and show everything again. Hit OK. Now what I'm going to grab is I'm simply just going to right click on each of, so this is a crosshair that contains all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these pins. So if I click on it, you can see that I can highlight all of them together. I'm simply going to right click on this crosshair and click Open Footprint. Okay, so in our case, I'm getting a bit of an error here. Okay, this error is telling me that it was unable to find the library which it was initially from. Now the reason for this is currently, since I opened it in this other tab, I don't have the library currently added. So I need to go to Library Manager real quickly. It's going to take a little bit of time. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is look at what's available. So to do that, I'm just going to go to my C drive. I'm going to look at my other Eagle, and I'm going to find where I have my libraries, or my LBR, right here. And I'm just going to do my Control A like we did at the very first tutorial. And you'll see now that there's a whole bunch of different libraries here, and it's actually kind of overwhelming my computer right now. But once it starts to load, I'm just going to hit Control A to select everything, and then simply hit Use. Okay, and this might take a little bit of time, and it might say not responding, but that means it's working. And it's just adding in all the libraries. If you want the quick solution, you can actually just add Micro Builder. You could search through here until you found an M for Micro Builder, and that would actually fix the problem we were having. But you can see this number is just dropping down, but you can see that each one are being added. Eventually, we should be fine. Okay, meanwhile, while this is going on, one thing I want to say is that one thing that's preventing us from being able to simply copy everything in here and just pasting it over here is that what we had mentioned before is in a library, a device is made up of a package, which is the part we're designing, and a symbol. So whenever we were to do a copy of all of these elements in here, each one of these elements are devices in themselves. Okay, so if I try to add a device to a package, it's kind of a contradiction because, you know, inside of a regular device, I have a package. So a device cannot exist inside of a package. Okay, so when I try to copy it, I would get an error. So to mitigate this, what we have to do was whenever I was actually right-clicking on this crosshair, I was going to hit Open Package. Now what I can do is open the package that corresponds to this this set of headers here, and then I can copy from that package to another package. So package to package is fine, but I cannot take a device and put it in a package. All right. So we're almost done loading this all in. Okay, so all that's done. Now I should be fine to right click and do open footprint. And it is not okay. Interesting. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to exit out of this. And I am simply going to take this board file, copy it, and just paste it somewhere where I can have access to it. And so I just paste it in my documents here. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click on this other version of Eagle and click on this Eagle option here. And this is going to open it in version 8.7.1 where we know Micro Builder does exist in. Okay, so give it a little bit of time. So now it's gone ahead and opened it up. And I'm just going to hit File, Open, and I'm going to open up from the board, look at my documents, and find where I had saved it. It's right here. Alright, now let's give this a try. Open package. And now it opened up without any problem. Okay, so see, the whole issue that I was having before was just that, you know, I have this other version of Eagle, and I shouldn't be playing with one version of Eagle and another version of Eagle, so I'm just going to close out the other one. And so I'm just going to copy all of this by just doing a Control-C over it. And then I'm going to go back to my other window where I'm actually creating the library. You can see that I'm doing it in here. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is just copy and paste it. Now the way I want to make sure that I align this is such that this is centered with this other one. Okay? And once you know that it's centered, you can go ahead and press once. But if you don't notice that it's centered, I would recommend bringing your fineness down. So just changing your grid line accordingly. Alright, in our case, I don't have to do that because my grid line was already so small in the first place. What now we need to do is actually get rid of this square in the back. And I'm just going to do that by clicking on the center. So if you click once, it will first highlight the thing you're about to delete. And then you have to click again to actually confirm the delete. Okay? So if you accidentally click and you highlight the circle part, just hit escape and keep trying to select the actual square. Okay, so now I have each one of these holes lined up. Okay, and the next part you can do is actually add in the holes of the located on our other board here. So you notice that there are like 4 corresponding holes for this board. And so what we can do is actually, if I click on here, this tells us that the holes are 2.5 millimeters. So you can see that 2.5. And apparently I can't click that one. But that's a part of the USB, so that makes sense. So I just need to add these little two 2.5 millimeter holes. And I'm just going to take note of their positions in the X and the Y. Okay, now this is in inches. Okay, so just take note that, you know, one of them is an X of 0.1 inches and a Y of 0.8 inches, while the other one is 0.1 inches and 0.1 inches. Okay, and once I have that, now I can just go back to my other layout here, which is this, and I'm just going to go ahead and add a hole. Okay, now the hole by default, the drill size is currently 0.35. I believe that's millimeters. Yeah, it's millimeters in our case. We're going to change that. We're going to save it as millimeters, but instead we're going to make this value 2.5 millimeters. Okay, so that's the diameter of the hole we need. So I'm just going to place two of these down, and I'm just going to use the info. If I use the info tab and click on this, notice that the units are still in millimeters. So I need to go back and change the grid line to inches. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to click back on this again. And I'm going to change those positions to what I had noted before, so 0.1 and then 0.8 for this top one. And for the next one, I'm going to make this 0.1 by 0.1, just like that. Okay, so I'm pretty much done. I have each one of the holes that are on this board here. Okay, if you have more holes that you need to add, just do exactly what I said in terms of getting the dimension measurements and then placing the corresponding number of holes next to each other. All right. Okay, so that makes up the board layout. The last thing I'm going to add to this is just a simple little text. So I'm going to hit the text tool. I'm just going to say boost charger 1000C. Okay, and this just tells me if whenever I add it on my actual board, what this component really is. So I'm just going to change the size here to about 0.1 and just going to place it down like that. Okay, and that is pretty much it for creating the package. I'm going to hit save, and it's going to ask me, what do you want to label this library? I'm just going to label it something like my custom parts .lbr. Okay, now I'm going to hit this button. Okay, this is the table of contents. It's going to bring us back to the main library, and you can see under package we can now see what we just created. The next thing we need to add is our symbol. Okay, so we've now created the package, but now I need to create the corresponding symbol for this. Alright, so I'm going to hit new symbol, and I'm just going to also give it another name. I'm just going to say, I'm going to give it the same name, Adafruit Boost, Power Boost 1000C. Okay, it's prompt me and hit yes. And now all I have to do is simply create a little polygon that will function as my symbol. So to do this, I'm just going to first create, actually do not use the polygon tool, use the line tool, and just create the outline of what you want. So I'm first going to work with this and see if that's a good setup. And then the next thing, you want to use these pin tools here. Okay, now with the pin tool, you're just going to add little pins, and you need to add a pin for every single one of these. So in our case, we have 8 of them. We need to make sure that we have 8 of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And those are all the pins that I need. And the last thing I'm going to do is just give it a name. So I'm just going to say Adafruit. I'm just going to say Power Boost. Power Boost. Just like that. And then I'm going to put another one right under it. I'm just going to change the value of it and just give it 1000C. Okay? So that just tells me what this is. And now I need to give a name for each one of these pins by using the name tool. Okay, I'm going to hit the name tool, and I'm just going to click over this object here. So to figure out, I need to figure out what the pins actually are. So I have USB, BAT, and then VS. I'm just going to click on this. USB, let's say BAT. And I'm going to do is VS, then EN, VS, EN, then this was ground. Okay, and then there's no label to that one, so I'm just going to go back real quick and figure out what that actually is. So just looking at it, we can see they have everything. They have ground. They have it called LBO, so I'm just going to give it the same name. LBO. Okay, and they seem to also tie the next one to ground. I'm just going to go back to here. So they have ground and then 5 volt. So I'm just going to click on this. Ground. So I'm going to call this ground 2 because there's already another ground there. And then the last one is our 5 volt. Okay, so everything here is labeled. The last thing I'm just going to do is using the using some of this. Let me see if I can actually do this. Okay, I can't do that. Interesting. Okay, so this actually works quite well. The next thing we're gonna do is just hit the save button and come back to here. Okay, so we have a package, we have a symbol. Now we need to tie the two things together. So if I go back to package, you'll see that each pin was given a unique number associated. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 8. All right. And if I go to, my symbol, you'll see that there are 8 pins. Now we need to tell Eagle, when we create a device, which one of the symbol pins corresponds to these unique pin numbers on here. So to do that, I'll just hit add device, and I'll give it a name, native fruit power boost 1000C. It's going to ask me, do you want to create a new one? I'm going to hit yes. Okay, so on one hand of the screen is where we need to add in our symbol, and then the other hand is where we're going to add in our package. So to add in the symbol, you're simply going to hit this button right here, the add tool, and there should be only one symbol, which is the one we created, and I'm just going to place it in on the crosshair, just like that. Alright, and then in here, I'm just going to hit new, and then add local package. Okay, I'm going to find that exact package we just created and hit OK. Alright, so now the last thing I have to do is simply hit connect, and then I need to tell it which pin corresponds to what. So pin 1 was this pin right here, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down. So if we look back at this, it's telling me that pin 1 is USB. So I'm going to select USB and then 1 and hit OK. I'm actually going to hit connect, not OK. Alright, pin 2 correlates to BAT, so I'm going to find BAT. I hit connect. Pin 3 is VS, connect. And then we had enable, ground, we have enable, we have ground, and then we have LBO, and then we had ground 2, and then 5 volts. Okay? If you ever make a mistake on any of these, feel free to click them and then hit the disconnect button, and then you can go ahead and correct them in here. But we've gone ahead and done everything correctly, so you can just hit OK. And now everything is hooked up, and it's been told, you can see each one of these correspond to a number, and that number is listed on here, and they correspond to the numbers on here as well. Alright, so we've gone ahead and created a library. Awesome. I'll just hit the save button, and now the big question is, okay, how do I use this library? So I'm just going to quickly show you how you can bring this library over. So I'm just going to close everything out, and I'm going to open up that board file we designed previously. And this is what we had before. And the first thing we need to do is first go into library and open the library manager again. And since we created a new library, anytime you create a new library, you first need to check the available and actually add it into Eagle. So we're just going to do a Control A inside of LBR and hit open. And you can see there is one new library, and it's on my custom parts. I'm going to hit use. Awesome. Then I'm going to hit the add tool. Alright, it's just loading everything in. And so now if I go to my custom parts, I'm going to look for my custom parts right there. And you'll see that there is one Adafruit Power Boost 1000C, and I'm just going to paste it in here. All right, so I'm just going to try to start creating some, connections to it. You'll see that, when I do this right, I can copy the 5 volts to here. Notice that this may happen sometimes where you can't physically connect it. You need to change your increment down. We'll change it to 0.05, which halved it, and now you can see it will make the connection. All right, and the last connection I'm going to make is this little ground connection. And I'm just going to copy my ground and paste it right there. And now let's hop over to our board view, and you can see, bam, it's right there for us. And we could add it to our current schematic as well as our board layout. And now you can see everything is properly labeled. That ground pin, the 5 volt, and now I just have to add the traces for it. Obviously these traces are not sized properly, but you can kind of get an idea of how you would connect with this, just like that. All right, so that's the whole process of making a custom library, and I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Thanks.